Hey chess lovers and friends, welcome back to Casper Chess. Today I've put together a special collection of the fried liver attack for you. I noticed that many of you might have missed some of these amazing gems, so I have organized them all in one place for easy access. Stay tuned and enjoy. So first of all, let's look at how you play your fried liver attack. As a beginner or an intermediate level player, you start with e4, then black goes pawn to e5, knight f3, knight c6, then bishop c4, called the Italian game. Now you already know that the fried liver attack happens in the two knights defense, where black plays knight f6. Of course, black can play bishop c5 on move 3, but I already covered this move in the video that has popped up in the card above. You can check it out. So today we are looking at the two knights defense, where you have an opportunity to play the fried liver attack with knight g5, double attacking the weak f7 square. And of course, the top played move in this position is pawn to d5, after which you just capture back, and then black plays knight takes d5. At the end of this video, I'm also going to show you what to do if black plays the main move knight a5. So let's start with knight takes d5. After this, your grandpapa or your old coach advised you to take on f7 with your knight. That is okay, it's not a mistake, but at beginner level and intermediate level, it is still not that easy for you to convert. First of all, you're not mating anytime soon. It's not even clear how you can go about it. Secondly, you still have to work for your meal. Thirdly, black can hold on to an extra piece, though the game will still be equal. And lastly, the fried liver attack needs continuous attacking. So once you stop attacking, black may come back into the game. For example, if black takes your free knight and then you go queen f3 check, they can just hold on to their knight with king e6, let's say knight c3, putting more pressure on the d5 knight. Well, black has knight b4, paving way for his c-pawn, protecting that knight. If you want to believe what I'm talking about, check the eval bar. It only takes one reluctant, obvious move like pawn to a3 for black to come back into the game. You can see how the eval bar has changed in favor of black with a negative 1.1 advantage. So if you want to play the fried liver attack this way, then you need to continue being accurate and aggressive, otherwise things can hit back so badly, which is why I want to show you what masters do. Instead of sacrificing the knight on f7, let disaster begin. Here we go. So once again, you start with e4, then black plays e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, then black plays the two knights defense, knight to f6, just go knight g5, and after pawn to d5, just take that pawn. And this time, if black takes on d5, you don't sacrifice your knight on f7 right away, but instead you play this mastery move, which is kind of a quiet move, but it also paves way for your dark squared bishop. This one move will lead to many traps that you didn't know, guys. Let me show you. The top played move, for example, is knight takes d4. That's what everybody plays, even in the masters database. So the way you begin your attack right on move 7 is with pawn to c3. And look at this, the top played moves in the Lichess database are all blunders, which is a good sign, you guys. For example, if black plays knight c6, the second most played move, they are going to lose a free piece right away after bishop takes d5, game over. But let's say they play the top played move. Instead of knight c6, they rather go knight e6. Well, you still want to take the free knight on d5, but not with your bishop. You need to take with your queen, so that if knight takes g5, you win black's free knight with tempo while checking them. So once again, you are just up a full piece right on move 10. Let me know how you think about this way of playing the fried liver attack. By the way, this is called the lolly attack, just in case you didn't know. So let's see the right response for black. Instead of playing knight c6 or knight e6 on move 7. So for example, if I check in the masters database, I already see the move pawn to b5, which is the top played move and the top stockfish move. Well, even after pawn to b5, you still have ways to surprise your opponent. For example, the best move is bishop d3, but bishop takes d5 is still not much of a stretch. If queen takes d5, you can go ahead and take the free knight, but at the expense of a piece, black is going to win at least 3 of your pawns. For example, bishop b7, the move you want to play is king e2, but anyways, your d4 pawn is already dead, so you can play a desperado move like pawn to d5, let them take, and then you go king e2. Yes, you are up a piece, but Stockfish considers this to be an equal game because black has 3 pawns for a knight. So this is okay, but let me show you the professional way of continuing this instead of giving up your 3 pawns for a knight. So once again, back to the initial position of the lolly attack where you play pawn to d4 instead of sacrificing your knight. So after knight takes d4, you still go c3, and after the correct move, pawn to b5, the best move in this position, instead of taking on d5, is bishop d3. You can see that black's knight on d4 is still under attack, which is why they play knight e6, the top played move. But again, this turns out to be a big blunder because of this intermediate move, bishop takes b5 check. Look at this, guys. The top played move is bishop d7, which is a blunder again, because that allows you to capture the free knight on d5, and it doesn't even matter what black can do here. For example, knight takes g5, you can take the knight or play the best move, bishop takes d7 check. First of all, if queen takes d7, the rook on a8 will fall, and if king e7, the top played move again, you have bishop takes g5 check. In the process, you ended up winning almost every piece for black. Do you still believe the fried liver attack is better than this? Let me know in the comment section, you guys. To be honest, that's how you actively engage with my videos. It's not just about watching and giving likes. Besides, I also want to learn of your existence. Just leave a comment or a thank you in the comment section. Anyways, let's move on. Back to our lolly attack initial position. Remember, we just finished looking at what to do after knight takes d4, the top played move. But what if black plays e takes d4? Well, once again, you don't rush to take on f7 like what most white players do. This is a bad move, guys, because your e-file is already open and your king is exposed. Not to mention that black doesn't have to take your free knight with his king. All they have to do is to play queen e7 check and win this knight with tempo. By the way, queen e2 can't help due to queen takes. And let's say after king takes, black can just take your knight, and after bishop takes with check, king g6 makes a lot of sense. And still material is equal despite black being ahead in development with an active position. So the move that I want you to play is simply castle shot instead of taking. And now you can see the top played move in the Lichess database is bishop e7 followed by bishop e6. Well, these are the most common moves even in the masters database, as you can see, bishop e6 and bishop e7, by the way, which are both blunders. For example, bishop e7, well, this is when you can sacrifice your knight on f7 because your king this time is not exposed. So black has to take your knight, and now you go queen f3 check, and this time black doesn't even have king e6, which they play in the normal fried liver attack because our e-file is open. So we have rook e1 check. If black is not careful and play the second most played move, king d6, played by over 1000 people, this can lead to mate in one, ladies and gentlemen. What a funny way to win the game of chess. Anyways, instead of king d6, if black plays king e5, blocking the check, since they can't use their elbow to block the check, well, you still have bishop f4, adding more salt to the wound. If bishop d6 by black, you have queen takes d5, and if bishop f6, you can still take on e5, so that after bishop takes, you just simplify everything. By the way, queen f6 doesn't help because of pawn to f4, and black's bishop is dead. Back to our initial position, we just played pawn to d4 rather than sacking our knight, and we are still looking at the e takes d4 line. Again, just castle shot. We just finished looking at bishop e7, the top played move where you need to sacrifice your knight. But what happens if black plays bishop e6? Well, since this time you cannot sacrifice your knight on f7, just play rook e1, and after bishop e7, the top played move, by the way, which is a blunder. Yet again, there's a beautiful sacrifice here that I want you guys to keep in your mind always. It is not knight takes e6, the top played move in the Lichess database, even though that's fine, but be more creative, you guys. Rook takes e6 is the way to go, because if f takes e6, you have knight takes e6, also attacking black's queen. They play queen d6, by the way. Let me ask you a quick question. What do you do in this position? Do you take on g7 with check and move on with life, or there's a better move that you can play in this position? Most advanced players can solve this with one eyeball. The move is bishop takes d5, because that's just a free knight. How is that a free knight? Because if black takes, you have knight takes c7 check, and at the same time attacking the queen on d5. So that's why black cannot take your bishop. They better play king d7. Now that two of your minor pieces are under attack, you simply go pawn to c4, defending everything. I mean, if black takes with ampersand, d takes c3, you have knight takes c3, renewing the defense. And let's say knight b4, you go bishop f4, by the way, attacking this queen. Let's say queen b6, you have bishop b3, discovery check, king c8. I mean, there's just so many things that you can do. Honestly speaking, I think this is better than the fried liver attack, you guys, and very simple to understand. Anyways, let's move on. Back to our lolly attack initial position. So far we have looked at knight takes d4 and e takes d4. But what if black plays bishop e7 after we play pawn to d4? For example, bishop e7. Well, the problem with this is that it immediately invites the fried lever attack move knight takes f7. Although this line is different from the actual fried lever attack line due to our new pawn on d4 right here. If king takes f7, you still go queen f3 check. If king e6, you continue playing your normal fried lever attack with knight c3. What's the difference? The difference is that our pawn is already on d4, so we are putting more pressure on the e5 pawn. If knight b4, for example, we don't even have to play pawn to a3. That's not good. The move is castle shot, and if pawn to c6 this time, because our pawn is already on d4, we can play rook e1, and next we want to take on e5 with check. If bishop f6, the top played move, there are so many ways to kill a rat. For example, queen g3 is a move, but I like d takes e5 because this is a direct threat. If bishop takes e5, we have bishop f4, pinning the bishop to the king. If bishop e7, we have pawn to a3. If black takes, double attacking our rooks. Well, no need to memorize, just come up with your better attacking plan like rook d1, because there are so many sacrifices that we can make here. For example, if rook f8 by black, for whatever reasons, we have queen e4. By the way, knight takes a1 doesn't work because we can simply sacrifice our knight on d5. Black can't do anything. If c takes d5, we have rook takes. And there is a big problem to do with discovery check. If black doesn't take back on d5 and let's say goes king d7, we can simply take the poor bishop with check, discovery by our rook, and whatever black does, we're going to win his queen on d8. So this is just to show you how impossible the bishop e7 line is back on move 6. Because once again, you can just take on f7. You play this in the normal fried lever attack style. And whenever you see knight before, you just castle shot. But there are times when black may just go ahead and take your d4 pawn, which you already played, instead of going knight b4. Well, this time you can just play bishop takes d5 with check. That's just a free knight, by the way. If king d6, you just go queen d3, protecting your c2 pawn. And on the next move, you're going to rescue your bishop. Deal done. Anyhow, enough of bishop e7. We also looked at e takes d4 and knight takes d4 in this initial position. By the way, if you're still thinking of bishop b4 check, we can simply go c3. Black has to play bishop e7, where we can again sack our knight on f7, and after king takes, we play the same things that we have been talking about. Next, you want to go rook e1 and start putting more pressure on this pawn. In the near future, you have bishop f4, maybe queen g3 or queen e4, depending on black's responses. So this is just about everything you needed to know in our new fried lever attack, or the so-called lolly attack. So let's say you try to play your advanced fried lever attack with knight g5, d5, and pawn takes. Then this time black doesn't take on d5, allowing you to play your lolly attack or the fried lever attack, and rather go on knight a5, the main continuation in the two knights defense. Well, this attacks your bishop, so the main line goes as follows: bishop b5 check, pawn to c6 blocking the check, then you take on c6 after pawn takes. Your light squared bishop only has one active square to go to. Theoretically speaking, it must be placed on d3, over controlling the e4 square. How? Because if black plays pawn to h6 anytime, you can safely put your knight on e4, so that if knight takes, you can take back with your bishop, and that's okay for your eyeballs. If pawn to f5, which is the top played move in the leeches database, I don't know what's wrong with people, but this is a blunder, you guys, because you have queen h5 check. If king e7, the top played move, you can just take back that pawn and simplify the game. The king is still on the center, so black will find it difficult to improve his position, not to mention that these isolated pawns for black look bad. So just remember to retreat your bishop on d3, not on e2 or on f1. So that's the key. By the way, even if black doesn't take your knight on e4, and let's say they go knight d5, well, you can just go ahead and castle short. Once again, there's no pawn to f5 due to queen h5 check. And if bishop e7, well, you can just pave way for your light squared bishop, knight g3. I mean, it wasn't doing anything on e4. If castle short, your bishop on d3 already did its job of supporting knight e4. So now that your knight is safe, how do you improve your light squared bishop? Well, by getting rid of it in this way. So you want to exchange it. Bishop takes f5 by black is bad because that will help you activate your knight on a better square. So that's why they all play bishop a6, counterattacking your rook. the best you can do is just to go pawn to d3, and after rook e8, the top played move, there are so many things you can do. Knight d2, or even better, knight c3, which is more active. I think if knight takes, you're just going to simplify the game. By the way, you are just up a pawn in this 2 knights defense main line, so you have nothing to worry about. If g6, there's even this line where you can sacrifice your light squad bishop, because if they take it, you take with your knight. Next, you want to go queen g4 check and win everything. If bishop g5, you still go queen g4, because if pawn to f6, h4 is a killer. And just a friendly reminder, all of my courses are still on promotion. Yes, you still get 50% discount on all of them. That is, you will get a discount of 50% when you purchase any of my courses. Right, I actually discovered that there are quite a number of other beautiful openings that you can use in place of the fried liver attack. So the first opening on our list is the Scotch gambit sarrat variation, where you begin with e4, then black responds with e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, and then black plays the top played move bishop c5. Up to this time, everything looks normal, and of course black is expecting us to go pawn to c3, pawn to d3, or probably just to castle shot, all of which we are not even thinking about. The move, ladies and gentlemen, is pawn to d4. Right away. Now this opening will involve at least 3 amazing gambits before reaching the main variation of our interest, the sarrat variation. As you can see in the Leech's database, the top played move is e takes d4, followed by bishop takes d4 and knight takes d4. We are going to look at all of this before we move on to the next interesting opening. For example, e takes d4 is what you're going to see most of your opponents playing. Well, here the theoretical move is pawn to c3, which is okay, but I kinda hate this move because I feel it's just too predictable. For example, we expect black to take on c3 so that we can sacrifice our bishop on f7 with check, and after king takes f7 we go queen d5 check, then on the next move grab black's dark squared bishop, which is okay, but the problem with this is that most black players seem to know this line, so after pawn to c3 they may even play something else like knight to f, which is why I want to recommend a new move to you guys, knight g5. This puts the immediate pressure on the f7 square. For example, if pawn to d5 by black, you can simply take with your light squared bishop, so black just lost a free pawn, which is why we can't even worry about this. Another wasted move is knight e5, which some unprepared opponents play at times. Well, this is bad because we can simply sacrifice our knight on f7 like we always do in the fried liver attack. If knight takes f7, well, we can as well sacrifice our bishop on f7 with check, and after king takes, making black lose his right to castle. That's when we go queen h5 check, and let's say after pawn to g6 we just go ahead and take the bishop, or first of all give black a check, maybe to force him go back, and then grab the bishop. If you want, you can also play queen e5 check and maybe win the rook on h8, but anyways just take the bishop because you're threatening to win a free pawn on the next move, so this is also fine. Anyways, so having looked at black's candidate moves after knight g5, we can now look at the top played move knight to h6, which almost everyone plays after you play knight g5. Well, once again, this doesn't change anything. You can just go ahead and sacrifice your knight on f7, again double attacking the queen and the rook. So if knight takes, you simply go bishop takes once again with check, and after king takes, you have queen h5 check, which also comes with the same threat of winning the dark squared bishop on c5. If g6, again you don't have to take immediately. If you want, you can go queen d5 check and then take the bishop off. I mean, anything is playable. Queen takes c5 is also a move. If pawn to d6, you just go queen b5, preventing black from moving his light squared bishop. If s6, you just put your queen on d3 and continue playing as highlighted on the board. Anyways, back to our Scotch gambit sarrat variation, which arises from the Italian game where black plays bishop c5 on move 3, and then instead of castling short or playing pawn to d3 or c3, we immediately play pawn to d4. We just finished looking at the e takes d4 line on move 4, but what if black plays knight takes d4? Well, this is equally bad. First of all, the main move to consider is bishop d3, but knight takes e5 is still not much of a stretch because most of your opponents again won't know the correct continuation. For example, you can see the top played move is knight e6, played by over 20,000 people on leeches, which is a blunder because we can safely take that knight, and if d takes e6 for example, this is even worse because we can simply exchange queens and then win the free rook on h8 on the next move. This is bad for black, and we don't even mind even if we lose. That knight on h8 will just keep on developing normally as shown on the board. This is check, by the way, bishop g5 check. If king e8, we can go pawn to c3, preventing black from winning our rook. So this is an attack on the bishop. If bishop e5, we have pawn to f4 or even knight a3. Anything is playable as long as we are developing our pieces on the most active squares. They can go for our knight, but we can go for their king if we want, or just letting our knight die with dignity by capturing a free pawn on g6 and then go pawn to f4. In this position, we are just up by 2 pawns with a completely winning position. Again, after bishop c5 and pawn to d4 immediately, the knight takes d4. Well, you don't always have to take on e5. I mean, in the view of winning the rook on h8, instead of taking the free pawn on e5, you can just go bishop e3 immediately because black's bishop on c5 is undefended. I mean, if they play the top played move, knight takes f3, check. Well, again, that is a blunder because the bishop will just be free after queen takes f3. I don't even know why most people take on e3 here. You can see on the leeches database because that hangs mate in one like this. Anyways, black doesn't have to take on f3 after we play bishop e3. Maybe they should play the second most played move, knight to f6, but again, this turns out to be a blunder because of knight takes e5 this time, and we are threatening to take on f7 and the free knight on d4. For example, if they castle short, which is the top played move, well, that hangs the knight on d4, and so we should take it with our bishop, and after bishop takes, we just take back with our queen. In this position, we are just simply a piece up. Ladies and gentlemen, these are very effective traps, and as an e4 player, you must know these traps. You have no option if you want to improve. Anyways, one may say black didn't have to castle short. I mean, after taking on e5, for example, instead of castling short, black just needed to retreat his knight back to e6. But well, this is again a blunder because of bishop takes c5 first. That bishop was free. I told you, if knight takes c5, you simply have knight takes f7, double attacking the queen and the rook on h8. If queen e7, which is the top played move, well, you can just go ahead and take that free rook. Don't worry about your knight. You are up an exchange. If queen takes e4 check, just go for simplification, exchange queens, and at worst, this knight should die with dignity on g6 after taking a pawn or messing up black's pawns on the king side. Anyways, once again, e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, and bishop c5. Remember, we play pawn to d4 immediately on move 4. And so far, we have already looked at what happens if e takes d4 and knight takes d4. So now it is time to cover the correct move according to Stockfish bishop takes d4, which is the top played move in the Masters database, by the way. And this is why I love this gambit so much together with the Max Lenge attack and the Deuce gambit, because the only correct move for black is bishop takes d4, which they don't want to do in the opening. You know, strong players like keeping their bishop pair, but this line forces them to give up their bishop pair very early in the opening stage. So after bishop takes d4, you simply take back, and after e takes d4, you can just go ahead and castle short. Again, if pawn to d6, what else can you do here? You can't go queen h5, it doesn't make sense. Maybe pawn to f5. But hey, in most of these Italian lines, when you have nothing to do and your opponent's pawn is on d4, pawn to c3 is how you start your attack, because if they take, once again, you can simply take back with tempo, that's if you want, or even turn this into some kind of a Danish opening with queen b3. I mean, if they take on b2, they'll just help you activate your dark squared bishop on a more active square. So they play queen e7, you can see that's the top played move, defending their f7 pawn, and this is when you can take on c3 with your knight. If knight f6, the top played move, again, you just pin that knight with bishop g5. Next, you want to play knight d5. What's so difficult about this, you guys? Let me know how you feel so far in the comment section down below. So this is just to show you how you can play after bishop takes d4. Now it is time to move on to the next opening that has the potential to replace the fried liver attack. Our next opening is the two knights defense Perreux variation, where you begin with e4, then black plays e5, knight to f3, knight c6. Then this time, instead of going bishop c4 right away, you go pawn to d4. Guys, there are so many ways to kill a rat. This is what makes chess to be so interesting. Anyways, if e takes d4, the top played move by black, you can just go bishop c4, and of course they are going to play knight to f6, the top played move. By the way, this is the top played move in both the Lichess and the Masters database. So this is why you can go pawn to e5 if you want, or again go knight g5 immediately. I love this with all my eyeballs, you guys. The idea is that after pawn to d5 by black, the top played move, you just take that pawn. If knight takes d5, again the top played move, you don't make this mistake of sacrificing your knight on f7 because your king is still exposed, just like I said in my last video on the lolly attack. For example, knight takes f7, runs into queen e7 check first, and maybe black may win your knight with the queen. So don't just rush to sacrifice on f7 if your king is exposed. What you want to do first is to castle short, putting your king to safety, and this is the position that we saw in the lolly attack as well, where black plays bishop e7 or bishop e6, even in the Masters database, which are all blunders by the way. For example, if bishop e7, this is when you can sacrifice your knight on f7. If king takes f7, you go queen f3 check. In my last video, we saw what happened if the king goes to e6 in an effort to run away from check. But what if black plays the top played move bishop f6, blocking the check to avoid blocking with fingers? Well, you just go ahead and take that free knight with your bishop, and that comes with check. If bishop e6, covering the check, or you just take that bishop as well to simplify the game, and if you want, you can go queen b3 check and win the free pawn on b7. But why not being creative with other moves like knight d2 in this position or rook e1 check? I don't know, anything is playable. Anyways, the next one, which I recommend for rapid blitz and bullet, is an opening that arises from the center game where black obviously takes on d4 and then you don't take back but rather go knight f3 immediately, inviting knight c6. So by playing this way, you dragged black into your Scotch gambit game without him realizing. So instead of going bishop c4 right away, I recommend this weird looking move, knight g5, and you can see the top played move is pawn to h6, which is kind of a mistake because now you have knight takes f7 right away, the fried liver attack move. If king takes f7, this is when you go bishop c4 check, and black has to find the only correct move, king g6, which is very difficult to see if your opponent is not using stockfish or if he is not an advanced player. For example, they all play king e8, which can lead to mate in 6 by the way, after queen h5 check, and then king e7. There's a mate in 4 in this position, which I would love you guys to find and leave your answers in the comment section down below. Let me know what you think about this. In my last video, no one managed to find the puzzle that I gave. Hopefully this one, people will be able to get it right. Let's see what you think about this position. Find mate in 4 and leave your comments. What if black doesn't play king e8 this time, and let's say they go king e7? Well, you can just go pawn to c3. If d takes c3, you can simply take back with your knight. They all go knight to f6, which is kind of a mistake because of knight d5 check. And again, if knight takes d5, the top played move, you take back with your queen, trying to give a check on f7. So that's why they go queen e8 to prevent that. But you have a very dangerous move even in this position, bishop g5 check, sacrificing your bishop so that if they take, you take back with your queen, and after king d6, you simply castle long with tempo, and the only move for black in this position is to donate his knight, after which you just take it, and after king c6, you have queen b5 checkmate. Anyways, after h6, knight takes f7, king takes and bishop c4 check. What if black plays the correct move king g6, which I doubt if many of your opponents are going to see? Well, to continue with dignity, you can go pawn to f4 right away. You just simply want to castle short and then activate your pieces. I mean, if bishop c5 the top played move, you just go pawn to e5. If pawn to d5, you go bishop d3 check. If g6, you just continue marching forward. I mean, we're only remaining with one game in the database. If knight takes e5, you can simply take on f6 with your pawn. If knight takes g6, which is a blunder, there is simply mate in one with rook f7, checkmate. So we know that the fried liver attack begins with the Italian game, then goes into the two knights defense, where you play knight g5, then d5, ed, and knight takes d5. So once again, the idea is not to take the f7 pawn like what your coach told you in the beginning. And again, we don't want to play pawn to d4, which is the beautiful lolly attack. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you the new move queen f3 right on move 6. There are so many beautiful traps that are hidden in this line, you guys, and you're going to love it. But first of all, I want you to check the eval bar and see how confused Stockfish gets after you play queen f3. Look at this. The eval bar drops to negative 2.6, meaning black has a decent advantage, as if he is having 2.5 extra pawns. But look what happens to the eval bar after black takes that knight. It goes all the way up close to equal. Have you ever seen anything like this, you guys? Let me know in the comment section what you think. So this is going to be the start of our position where we take on d5 with our bishop. So we're basically giving black some urge which they can't easily convert. For example, in this position, knight d4 is the engine's top choice, which is only played by 7% of the leech's population. My God. So these are the lines that we're going to cover, starting from the top played move bishop e6, followed by queen f6, pawn to f6, queen g6, and finally knight d4. And I promise you're going to love this before subscribing to this channel. Let's go. Alright, so we just played bishop takes d5 on move 7, and then black plays the top played move in the leech's database bishop e6. This is a terrible blunder, you guys. This game is already over right on move 8. Just take that knight with check, e.g. the top played move is bc, after which you just take back with your queen, another check, they play bishop d7, covering the check, after which you win the rook, king e7, and now you go knight c3. Next you want to play knight d5 check given a chance, and start winning the pawns. And see this, you guys, black can't just stop blundering. The top played move played by over 2,000 people out of frustration is queen takes g2, which loses the queen on the spot. You are going to love this. Let me know what you think in the comment section, guys. Let's look at something else that black can do in this position. After you take their knight with check, well, rather than taking back on c6, they may also block the check immediately, but you can just take on b7 if you want, or be more creative by taking on d7, making black lose his right to castle. And then you take the f7 pawn, after which you drop your queen to d5 with check. You want to win this pawn, so black is forced to go to c8, forcing them to disconnect their rooks, after which you just castle short. And this is clearly winning for white once again, ladies and gentlemen. You have pawn to d3 coming, knight c3, f4, your rooks should be on the center. Anyways, let's see what else black can do. Instead of blocking the check on d7, let's say they play king d8, well, just take the free pawn. If rook b8, you still go knight c3. You have no weaknesses or whatsoever. Bishop g4 doesn't work, guys, because you have all sorts of moves like queen d5 check and castle short. If bishop d6, the top played move, you have pawn to d3, paving way for your dark squared bishop. Let's say queen g6, the top played move. You can do all sorts of things. For example, bishop d5, since you are already up a piece, you want to start exchanging pieces but not pawns. That's the principle. So by now we can already see that bishop e6 on move 7 does not work in any way. So let's move on to another line, queen f6, after we play bishop takes d5. Yeah, so the second most played move is queen f6, after which you still take on c6. The whole idea is to mess up black's pawn structure on the queen side. This looks weird for the endgame, you guys. And in all of these pawn structures, the move that you want to play next is pawn to d3 to pave way for your dark squared bishop. You are going to play bishop e3 first, then you go pawn to a3, and knight c3. So the top played move is bishop c5. Since you have a better pawn structure, just start simplifying the game, exchanging pieces. Imagine if you enter with this wave of connected pawns in the end game, you are already winning this game. They may castle short, but you can do the same or go knight c3. Your knight will never be attacked on dark squares by black's light squared bishop. Let's say f5. You castle to the side of the board where the majority of your pawns are, simply because your king will be escorting those pawns in the end game, while on the king side, you will use the minority attack rule to start exchanging these pawns. Anyways, let's see what else black can do instead of taking with the queen on move 8 after you take the knight on c6 with check. So this time they may take with the pawn, but again this is the same structure, you guys. If you want, you can go queen c3, but I don't see a reason to do that. If you already have a better pawn structure, just go for the kill, mess up black's pawn structure. This is good for your endgame, you guys. Again, you go pawn to d3. Let's say bishop c5, you just exchange pieces to simplify the game. This is clearly winning for white. There is no witchcraft here, voodoo or black magic. Rook g8, we have castle short. Bishop h3 doesn't do a thing because of rook f2. If king e7, just go knight c3. I mean, there's absolutely nothing that black is fighting for. The best you can do is just to trade off pieces. For example, rooks against rooks, and this rook maybe against this rook. In the long run, you will put your pawns on dark squares, making black's light squared bishop useless, and you will start capturing black's pawns with your knight and king. Done. So instead of queen f6, back on move 7, black may also play the third common move, pawn to f6, which is a blunder once again, just like bishop e6. Just go ahead and take on c6 with check. If bc, I mean, that was just a free pawn, by the way. You take back on c6 with your queen, and that's check. Whatever black does, you're going to win their free rook on a8. Bishop c5, by the way, the top played move, is yet another mistake because you have queen d5 check, and you win that bishop for free. I mean, it doesn't matter even if black doesn't take back on c6 after you play bishop takes c6 check. If bishop d7, I mean, that was still a free piece. Just take everything that black has in this world, and now, since you don't have queen takes f7 check this time, like in the bishop e6 line, you just take the b7 pawn. Again, your g2 pawn is well protected. If bishop d6, you go knight c3. You want to be developing your pieces in the opening, right? If rook a b8, I mean, you don't want to take on a7 because your g2 pawn will be hanging, so you want to bring back your queen. If f5, you have queen a4 check, and black has no time to capture your pawn on g2. Next, you are going to castle short and life goes on. You will play pawn to d3 or pawn to d4, even threatening to take on a7. I mean, pawn to f6 on move 7 doesn't work either. So let's see something else that black can do instead of all these things. Back on move 7, maybe black can play queen g6, but just like in the queen f6 line, you can simplify the game in this way, messing up black's pawn structure on the queen side, and once again go pawn to d3. You already know the ideas that we talked about. That's why they play bishop c5. By the way, we just transposed back to the position that we already had, so let's do something different here. Let's say black doesn't take on e3, allowing you to connect your pawns very well. Let's say they go bishop b6. The rule is you want to be placing your pieces on their most active squares. For example, I like pawn to a4 because it threatens f5 next. Besides, you are expanding your pawns for an endgame. They play pawn to a5, by the way, so you just go knight d2. This is what I call initiative. You want to put your knight on a better square, on the most active square. If they play bishop e6 or bishop a6, stopping your knight c4 ideas, well, you have another thing that they didn't see. Castle long, you are ahead in development. If pawn to f5, stopping knight e4 next, well, you can just go rook h e1. If pawn to f5, by the way, you can just take, and next you're going to take this poor pawn. If they decide to castle short, you just take the bishop, and next you're going to win the central pawn. This is clearly winning for white, you guys. So this is not that different from the queen f6 line that we looked at earlier on in the game. So this time, let's say after queen g6 and bishop takes c6 check, black doesn't take with the queen on c6, but let's say with a pawn. Once again, this is just the same situation. So back to our initial position of my boiled liver attack. So having looked at all the bad moves, which are the top played moves in the Leech's database, we now look at the top engine move by Stockfish, knight d4. This is the only equalizing move for black, and so you should know how to fight against it with white pieces. In fact, this is one piece that you need to study more out of everything that I've showed you so far. So your queen is under attack. Just go queen takes f7 check, making black lose his right to castle. But you still need to be very careful. For example, if you play knight a3, you are going to help black develop his dark squared bishop by taking and also activating his rook. If you play pawn to d3, for example, even though most black players play knight takes c2 check, there is a mate in one with queen takes c1 checkmate because the e2 square is covered by the knight. So this is the only line that you need to memorize if need be. So after queen d8 by black, you just go castle short, putting your king to safety. Don't worry about your a-rook. This knight will be out of the game. The second move that you need to know by heart is queen f5 by black after you play pawn to d4. This is not a good move because black is going to force a queen exchange. So this is the only line to memorize. The move that you want to play here instead of pawn to d4 is bishop e4. Stopping queen f5, you don't want to exchange your queens. Let black take your rook on a1. It's not going to come out. So this is when you play pawn to d4, paving way for your dark squared bishop. There is no queen f5 this time, no queen exchange. If queen e7, go queen h5. It can only take one move. For example, e takes d4 for black to throw away the game completely. You have bishop g5, that wins the queen. So black has to be very careful if you play this correctly. The top played move is pawn to g6, but that's just a free pawn. By the way, if bishop g7, that's another blunder because of bishop g5. If bishop f6, you just take the free pawn on e5. This, ladies and gentlemen, doesn't work because you have rook d1 check. The king can't go anywhere. If bishop d7 blocking the check, since black cannot block this check with his elbow, you have bishop f5. So in this line, you are assured of winning the game. For example, one example game in the Leech's database went like this: king c8, rook takes d7. Even though white could have taken on h7 with his rook, he played rook d5, discovery on the king, and on the next move he managed to win black's queen. Again, you can see this knight doing nothing on a1, so don't be afraid of losing your rook in this line, guys. So back on move 7 once again, after bishop takes d5 and knight d4, the top engine move, you simply take on f7 with your queen, and after king d8, you don't go pawn to d3 and hang mate in one. You just castle short. If they take on c2, just play bishop e4, stopping queen f5. After knight takes a1, this is when you go pawn to d4. If queen e7, once again, you go queen h5. But what if they go pawn to g6, and after bishop takes, they don't go bishop g7, they play h takes g6, giving up their rook? Well, it looks like black can rescue his extra piece, the knight on a1, since our queen is away. But this doesn't work. For example, if knight c2, you can simply go bishop h6, pinning that bishop. You're going to take on e5 next and play rook d1, or simply go bishop g5. If queen takes, you have queen takes f8 check. The only move is king d7. First of all, it's up to you to force a draw in this line or win immediately. For example, queen f7 check. If king c6 is played, you have queen c4 check and you're going to get back your piece. But if black plays king back to d8, you can still go back, give a series of checks. Again, if king d8, you go queen f8 check. By the way, it's up to you to change the game. Instead of going queen f7 check again, you can just take on e5. Black still has no way to rescue his knight. For example, if knight d4, you have queen f7 check again, and that is going to win the knight on d4. If, for example, they go queen e7, you still have queen d5 check, and on the next move, you're going to win the knight. So it's very difficult for black to rescue his knight in many of these lines. I suggest that you look at this line with Stockfish using the Leech's analysis board if you have any other questions. I did, and I didn't find any sensible continuation for black. Now, before I end this video, I want to show you other possible sideline variations that black can play in our boiled liver attack that goes as shown on the board, where we do not take on f7 after knight takes d5 by black. Again, you play queen f3, but what if black doesn't take your knight on g5 because they think you are up to something which they don't know? For example, let's say they play bishop e6, the second most played move. Well, you can just go ahead and take the bishop. If fe, you don't have queen h5 check, you guys. Learn to evaluate the current position, don't play by memorization. So you can just castle short. If knight d4 this time, evaluate the position once again, there are some changes on e5. The e5 pawn is not defended this time. So you have queen h5 check. After g6, you are going to take that free pawn. And on the next move, grab black's rook on h8. Even if they take your rook on a1, you are safe. You just start winning all the pawns. By the way, once again, black's knight cannot even escape from Sobibo because of queen takes g6 check. And on the next move, you're going to win that free knight. So this is just one line to show you how the game can go if black chooses not to take your free knight on g5. So instead of bishop e6, if they play pawn to f6, once again, you can just go ahead and take the knight on d5 with either your bishop or even better your queen, intending to checkmate on f7 in case of f takes g5, by the way, which is the second most played move. I don't know why. So you just take on d5 with your queen. If they exchange queens, that's well and good. Let them take your knight because you can mess up their pawn structure. Again, you can see in most of these lines, if things go well or if black tries to refute your lines, they are going to remain with the bad pawn structure for the end game. Let's see what else black can do after they choose not to take your knight. For example, instead of bishop e6 or pawn to f6, let's say black plays knight d4 attacking your queen. Hey guys, this is your puzzle for today. Let me know how you can save your attacked queen on f3 with dignity. Leave your answers in the comment section down below. I'll start marking them and recognize your names. I do concur with Caruana's argument that the fried liver attack with knight takes f7 isn't as deadly as it looks. In fact, it's very much solvable.
So like one of the early kind of serious ones that I learned, and this was kind of topical at the time, which started in the Italian and then here and then knight g5, which attacks f7, which is like, if you're kind of new to chess, then you probably immediately think like, why can't I just attack that pawn and take it? And then I'll attack the queen and the rook and so on. The only way for black to kind of avoid that is to play d5, which is the best move. And then white takes a pawn, and the big question is always like, why can't black take back? Which you can, of course. It's not, you don't lose immediately or anything. But the usual point of this, which is called the fried liver, is that now white sacrifices a knight. Black takes, otherwise black's just losing everything. And then we give a check here, which not only gives a check, but also attacks the knight. And most people who are kind of new to chess, they're already totally unsure of what to do with black here because they move their king back and then you take here and you're up a pawn for nothing. Or even worse for them, sometimes they go here and then not only are you up a pawn, but you're checkmating. And the knight can't go anywhere because of the pin. So the only possible good move, which is not even so bad, is king to e6, and then you're up a piece, but you have this like serious pin, which lasts a really long time. And this is kind of like an opening trap called the fried liver. It, I think, ends up being not the worst opening trap to fall into with black because you can kind of hang on to your knight and hope for the best with your king on e6. And if you ever get this position, you should be pretty happy because then you just, black will, for example, Magnus played this against Ali Rosa. He played knight c7 in a bullet game, so I don't know if you can take it with a grain of salt. But it's not a very good position. I think after d4, it's like kind of disaster for black. And I think he also lost the bullet game, so.
And for that reason, I want to introduce to you a new weapon, which I believe is more deadly than the fried liver attack. I'll also include some beautiful traps along the way, so stay tuned. As white, you start with e4, and then black usually responds with e5. Then you go knight f3, black responds with knight c6, bishop c4, the Italian, and then they play knight f6, the two knights defense. At beginner and intermediate level, I highly recommend you go knight g5, setting up the fried liver line. The top played move here is pawn to d5. Now, this is when you want to take with your pawn, and of course there are two popular moves in this line. We are going to look at the knight a5 main line later on, but let's start with what many chess players do in this position: knight takes d5. Now, it is this position that Caruana was referring to, that taking on f7 is good, but it's not as deadly as it looks. In fact, this is very much playable, and super grandmasters no longer play these kinds of things. In short, the fried liver attack is refutable at master level. Now let's see why. Just to expand on what Caruana meant. Black can just take that knight, and after queen f3 check, the best black can do is to play king e6. And that's it. We can't take the knight. Even if we play knight c3 in this position, the best that black can do to equalize the game is to play knight b4. This also attacks the c2 pawn, and I've seen some coaches advising their students to play pawn to a3 here, giving up the rook, but this doesn't work. In fact, this only gives black a decisive advantage, as you can tell by the eval bar. Because if knight takes and king d1 is played, black is just going to be up an exchange or a rook for nothing. I mean, you might think taking on d5 with your knight will hurt, but see, it will just take moves like pawn to c6 or even better queen h4 for black to completely come back into the game. What this does is that if white takes with check, we can simply go king d7 and both the knight and the bishop are under attack. I think in this position, this is the best that white can do. Then queen e7, queen takes, bishop takes, knight takes. That knight won't come out of Babylon anytime soon. As black here, you can even play king d6, and if something like pawn to b4 in an effort to trap or win that knight, black simply has bishop f5 in this position, and there are some problems. We're just one move away from rescuing that knight. d3, b5 will grab that knight. If bishop takes, we have knight b3 and that. If white plays something like bishop a2, see that knight on a8 is already trapped, it can't move. So rook c8 comes to our rescue in this position. I mean, look at that. If anything, we might even be up a piece. So this is why the tradition of fried liver attack isn't as popular at master level than it is at beginner level. Or at least, let's say one of the reasons why it's not that popular anymore. It is for this reason why I want to show you a better replacement of this so-called fried liver attack. After pawn takes and knight takes, watch. Instead of taking on f7 right away, I propose you play pawn to d4. By the way, I'm not saying taking on f7 is wrong or the fried liver is bad. No, that's not the point. What I'm simply saying is I believe the lolly attack is better than the fried liver attack, theoretically speaking. Pawn to d4 also paves the way for your dark squared bishop, guarding that knight. Now, last line for today, the knight a5 line. After knight g5, d5, pawn takes, and instead of knight takes d5, black plays the main line, knight a5. Before I recommend a beautiful sideline that you can depend on, let me just show you the main line, two knights. You go bishop b5 check, they play c6, you take, they take back with the pawn, and then the best you do is to play bishop d3. This is the only thing you need to remember. Not bishop e2, not bishop f1, play bishop d3 and it is done. Why bishop d3? Because at least you know if they play h6, you can safely play knight e4. See that there's a difference. If you played bishop e2 here, h6 was going to be much stronger. I mean, after this, black was going to play pawn to e4. I mean, attacking you like nothing. So that's why, theoretically speaking, we choose bishop d3 over bishop e2. So that if h6 comes, we simply go knight e4, challenging that other knight. By the way, they don't even take most of the times. They play knight d5, trying to complicate stuff, maybe wanting to go f5 in the near future, but this is when we go castle short and begin playing normal chess. But let me show you another great way to counter this knight a5 variation. Instead of playing bishop b5 check right away, try this, pawn to d3. With this, you're just telling black that, hey, I want to hold on to my extra pawn. If you take my light squad bishop, I'll just take, and that's it. I still have all my 8 pawns and you only have 7. Okay, that's not a justification, to be honest, but this is just a simpler way to counter the two knights. Again, if pawn to h6 is played, you can go knight f3. If pawn to e4, you go knight d4. That's it. Next, you might want to castle short, maybe pawn to h3 first. Knight c3 is always useful. Bishop f4 or bishop a3, you continue playing normal chess. But anyway, after pawn to d3, knight takes and pawn takes, what if black plays c6 right away? What I love doing is just castling. In this position, if they take, I then take back. Simple chess. Or sometimes go rook e1. It's all about the center pawns, right? I'm attacking the e5 pawn now. If bishop d6, that's when I take back. Or better go knight c3 in this position. If d4, I have queen takes. Pawn can't take me. Anyway, if pawn takes, even better is to go knight b5. I'm attacking the dark sword bishop twice. Bishop c7 or bishop b8, whatever. Yeah, I would go queen takes, and after bishop takes, knight d6 check. Wherever the king goes, I'll go knight d takes f7. Either the rook or the bishop is going to die. And that's all for today, you guys. Let me know which episode you liked the most in the comment section down below. And if at all you would love to see more of these kinds of content where I compile my favorite videos in one collection, of course, to make it easier for you guys, let me know. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, bye bye.